Right, Erev Tov Rabbosai. It is the end of Chodesh Av, beginning of Chodesh Elul. We are sending out the link here so that everybody can follow. Baruch Hashem. We are holding, for those that missed the Shir on Shabbos, we are catching up Shabbos Shir, which is Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. We are starting from where we left off, at the bottom of Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph, where the Gemara was discussing the psukim with regards to Tumah of Mashkin, asking the question about Tumah of Mashkin as it is related in the pasuk. So we'll just to catch us up here a little bit. The Brisa had told us that Rabbi Akiva had taught, this is at the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, V'chol kli cheres asher yipol mehem eina omer tamei ela tamei. So the pasuk says Yitma, and Rabbi Akiva was Dirshu, not Yitma, but Yitame Acherim. It could be can make other things. Tamei limit al kikashin sha'ose shlish b'chulin, which tells you that the loaf that becomes tamei through a kli can make something else tamei, even if it is chulin. Says the Gemara, v'hachi heichi darish. How does he learn in the pasuk with regards to mashkin? The pasuk says, v'chol mashka asher yishaseh b'chol kli yitma. Any liquid that is drinkable in any kli yitma will become tamei. So that same yitma is yitame letamei tumas eichlin. It could make other things tamei. This is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, that yitame means that it can make other things tamei. Can it make only eichlin tamei, or eina ela letamei tumas mashkin? Or can it even make tumas mashkin? Amarta, and the response was like achaya. No, that was not the way that we learned it. Meaning, you can only be metame tumas eichlin, but not tumas mashkin. So the Gemara then says, "My loy kachaya." What do you mean that's not the way that you learn it? Amar Papa says, "Le matzina tumas osa kiyotze ba." Papa told us that there's a general principle that you cannot, something tamei cannot make another thing of its same type tamei. And we pointed out that there are 4 different things that can become susceptible to tumah. There's adam, people, kelim, vessels, eichlin, food, and mashkin, drinks. Which means that eichlin cannot make other eichlin tamei, and mashkin cannot make other mashkin tamei. Eichlin can make mashkin tamei, maybe mashkin can make eichlin tamei, and we're going to challenge all of that in a few minutes. But that's what Rav Papa says. That's why we say loy kachaya. That's not how we learn, because it can be mitame other things, but not something of its own genre. Ravina tells us, from the pasuk itself, you learn that yitma cannot mean tumas mashkin. How do you know that yitma cannot mean that mashkin can be metame other mashkin? Because if you think that the yitma at the end of the pasuk is to teach you that it can be metame tumas mashkin, yitma dereisha, then the beginning of the pasuk nami metame tumas mashkin is also talking about being metame tumas mashkin. And if that's the case, na'arvinu v'nichtavinu, then the pasuk should have just made everything shorter. The pasuk says 2 separate, it says Yitma twice in the pasuk. Why would I need to say Yitma twice in the pasuk? If it's the same din, just say Yitma, meaning Metame, twice. When it talks about Eichlin, it could be Metame Mashkin, and Mashkin be Metame Mashkin. You don't need the pasuk to tell you Yitma, Yitame, to teach you that both Eichlin and Mashkin could be Metame. What could you have said? The pasuk could have read Mikol ha'Eichel asher yachel asher yava alav ma'im. Instead of saying there Yitma, just carry on saying v'chol mashkin asher yishaseh b'chol kli yitma, meaning lump them together. Eichlin can be metame mashkin, mashkin can be metame mashkin. This is Ravina from the pasuk itself. You see, it's obvious that that these are separate in him. So now you have the question. Okay, so now we do have the word yitma there twice. So trei yitma lamali ella yitma the ratio of tumas mashkin, yitma the sefer tumas eichlin. Ravina says, why do I need the pasuk to say yitma twice? It must be that the first yitma is to tell you that eichlin can make liquids, can make mashkin tamei, and the second part of the pasuk is that mashkin can make eichlin tamei. Those are the 2 dinim that you're learning. Says the Gemara, hold on, this is right at the bottom of Yud Ches Amud Aleph. Maybe that just means that you could be metame kelim. Oh, maybe one of the yitmas is not talking about mashkin or oichlin. Maybe it's talking about kelim. Says the Gemara, "V'lav kal v'chomer." Would this not be a kal v'chomer umakli shemetame mashke in metame kli? A kli that can be metame a liquid. Cannot be metame a kli. Two kelim. If I have two pots, one of them's tame, one of them's tar, and they touch each other, no tumah has been transferred. Mashkin habar machmas kli. The mashkin that came as a result of the kli, the mashkin that became tame because it was in the kli. And additionally, as a kelim, it's not going to be stronger in transferring of tumah than the kli that made it tame. Meaning, the kli made the water tame, and now the water cannot make a kli tame. So that's out of the question. Says the Gemara, "Ve'ema kiloi mitamo mashkin habai machmas kli." Maybe liquids cannot make a kli tame if they became tame from a kli. But what if you have liquids that became tame as a result of a sheretz? Meaning you have a dead lizard that fell into dead iguana that fell into your liquid. So maybe that could absolutely be mitame. Says the Gemara, hold on a second. Is there ever a time that you find liquids that are tame due to a sheretz anywhere in the Torah? The Torah never speaks about such a case. Meaning, we know that it's true that they must be tame because we know that a sheretz makes liquids tame, but the Torah doesn't speak about that case. V'lav kal v'chomer kasi. And so couldn't you learn as a kal v'chomer? Ma mashkin abав machmas kli mitamin. Mashkin abав machmas sheretz lekol sheken. We know that liquids that come as a result of a kli are metame, meaning that they are tame, and they could be metame other things, not a kli, but they could be metame oichlin. If you have a liquid that now is a rishon tumah, I mean the abatum is the sheretz, the rishon tumah is the liquid. Like again, how much more so? Is that not all the more so? Says the Gemara, a fundamental principle in Kal V'chomer is dayol avomin adin liyos kenidin. It's enough for the thing that we are learning from to be as chomer as the thing that is the original din. And the example that I always give in explaining this principle is that if you have somebody that jumps off of a 5-story building and breaks his leg, so what can you say about somebody that jumps off a 10-story building? You can say he'll break his leg. Could you say that he'll break more than that? No, because you don't know. We don't have more information. We know that the thing that makes a person crash to the ground is gravity, and the effect of gravity and the speed that a person will reach will be higher on a higher floor. But we don't know what the effect of that will be. We know that it will at least make you break your leg. That we know with certainty. What do we know more than that? Nothing. We don't know how much this effect is magnified by higher floors, which is the principle of dayol. Dayol avomin adin. It's enough to be learnt out of this law, lios kenidin, to be like the thing that we're comparing it to. Which means that if we're comparing something that becomes tameh as a result of a sheretz to something that is tameh as a result of a kli, so what we know is that the kli makes the liquid tameh, and the liquid can now pass on that tumah to oichlin. But we cannot prove anything about liquid that became tameh as a result of a sheretz. All that we know is that it can make oichlin tameh. We cannot prove anything more than that because we don't have a pasuk teaching us that din, and the Kal V'chomer only teaches us that a high level of tumah will make it as severe as a low level of tumah in terms of its potency to transfer that tumah. Says the Gemara, okay, so how does Rabbi Akiva learn the beginning of the pasuk? Yitma Dirshu Hechidarish. How does he learn the beginning of the pasuk? Mikola Oichar Shel Yerachel. This is at the top of Yirches Beis. We're on Yirches Beis. Says the Gemara, Yitma Dirshu Hechidarish. How do you learn Yitma at the beginning? How does she learn it? She says, "Mikala eichel asher yachel asher yavoy alav mayim yitma." All the food that is edible, that liquid comes onto it, yitma. Yitma, it can become tameh. Yitma l'tameh samashkin. It could be metameh the mashkin. That's how he learns it. Ata'im l'tameh samashkin. You're saying that it could be metameh mashkin, or eina el l'tameh sakli, or maybe it could be metameh a kli even. Right? Meaning, what's the liquid that's at the beginning of the pasuk? Sorry, the oichel in the beginning of the pasuk, could that be metame ekli? Amar Kal V'chomer, you said Kal V'chomer mashke she metame oichel and metame ekli. A mashke that can be metame a food cannot be metame ekli. Oichel she ain't metame oichel, but food that cannot be metame oichel in a din shelo yitma kli does not make perfect sense that it should not have the capacity to be metame ekli. Says the Gemara, Hamani mekayim yitma. So what does the word yitma mean? Letameas amashkin shem alulin lekabel tuma. Yitma means that it's metame mashkin shem alulin lekabel tuma. Liquids are very susceptible to tuma. Maybe that's how we're going to read this pasuk. Says the Gemara, "My area mashkin mishum dalulin lekabel tuma." Who says that we're talking about liquids because they're super susceptible to mekabel tuma? Just say that because there's nothing else. Meaning, how do you know that this is b'dafka talking about liquids and that this is because they're super susceptible? That's the most logical read of the pasuk. There's simply nothing else. Meaning, the food cannot be metame food and it cannot be metame kli. So what else is there? It's just liquids. So hachikam no. This is what Rabbi Akiva is saying in the pasuk. If you were to think that food is more chamer, is a more severe case of tuma, the metame mashkin, because it has the capacity to metame mashkin. Nitme kli, maybe it should be metame a kli because it can be metame mashkin. Hahu chumra de mashkin hu. Mishum de mashkin alun lekabel tuma. No. The reason that it has the capacity to be metame mashkin is not because the food is super chamer. It's because the liquids are very susceptible to tuma. Says the Gemara, "Mahi ali lasan." What exactly is the susceptibility that all of a sudden they have the capacity to be mekabel tuma? Shemekabel tuma shalai behechsher, because liquids can be mekabel tuma without previous preparation. They don't need a machsher for it. We pointed out that if you pick an apple off a tree, that apple is not yet able to be mekabel tuma. What does it need in order to be mekabel tuma? It needs to be washed. It needs to come in contact with the liquid. The liquid is tahar. But once the food has been made huchshar, is now susceptible to be mekabel tuma, it can be mekabel tuma if it comes in contact with something tummy. But a liquid doesn't have that prerequisite. A liquid can be mekabel tuma right away. Says the Gemara, okay, so that's how Rabbi Akiva is learning. It's not a chumrah of eichlin, it's not a chumrah in the power of eichlin, it's a chumrah in the susceptibility of mashkin. So Yitma, how do we learn this now? The ein osek yotzeba mehachanavka. So this principle that we've been saying, that Yitma means that it cannot make something of its own genre, tame. Mehachanavka. How do you know that? We've said this as almost axiomatically, that it cannot make a food cannot make a food tame, a liquid cannot make a liquid tame. How do we know that? We learn from the pasuk. Pasuk says, "V'chiyutan ma'im al zera." If you put liquid water on a seed, v'nafal menivlasam alav tamehu, and a nevela means an animal that was killed through something other than shechita. So that nevela is now tame. So tamehu. Now that seed is going to be tame. Who tame? Tamehu. It's tame. But it doesn't make something else tame like it. Says the Gemara, there are two dinim here. One is that one is telling you that it comes as a result of a sheretz, mashkin that became tame as a result of a sheretz, and one is as a result of mashkin that comes from a kli, meaning you need two psukim here. Al zerav nafal nivlasam alav tamehu hu tame. Meaning that's the limit is that one is going to be tame. Meaning we need an additional pasuk to tell you this din. Utsrichi, do you really need this? Do you really need this? If you only knew the din of mashkin that came from a kli that became tame as a result of a kli, mishum delechamiri, because the kli is not an avatuma. That's why it cannot transfer tuma. But maybe you would say with a mashkin that comes as a result of a sheretz, the chamiri, sheretz is an avatuma. So maybe then the liquid would be able to pass on tuma to another liquid. Maybe it can make something of its own genre, another liquid tame. And if the pasuk only told you the din of a mashke that comes as a result of a sheretz, and you would say, how much more so? A liquid that comes as a result of a kli would not have the capacity to make something else tame. So, so that's not a question, because the Gemara says sometimes the pasuk will tell you something that you could have learned with a Kal V'chomer will tell you a pasuk explicitly. Meaning, doesn't have to be that everything that Kal V'chomer is learned out of a Kal V'chomer. Sometimes the pasuk will tell you that din. Sometimes the pasuk will tell you that din. There's a lot to say about this particular thing, because the Gemara, this particular limud, because the Gemara in a number of places, in Bava Kama, the fifth paragraph, famously, the Gemara says, Lama li kra svarhu. If I have a svara, I don't need a pasuk. Meaning, and some of the Rishonim point out there that svara is even stronger than a pasuk. So why is it that the Gemara here is saying that it's okay to have a pasuk even though you could have learned it out of a svara? Okay, that's a kasha. So Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, V'ha Amar Rava, didn't Rava tell us? Lo Rabbi Yossi Savak Rabbi Akiva, v'lo Rabbi Akiva Savak Rabbi Yossi. Ravina says to Ravashi, didn't Rava already tell us that Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva? And Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi. What does it mean Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva? It means that he doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva with regards to a shlishi b'tuma, with regards to chulin. As opposed to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yossi holds that something that is a sheni l'tuma cannot make a shlishi l'tuma by chulin. Meaning he holds that it doesn't have shlishi b'tuma by chulin, doesn't exist. But Rabbi Akiva Sabra Rabbi Yossi means Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold like Rabbi Yossi with regards to a revi b'tuma of kachim. That there's no such thing as a revi b'tuma by kachim. Meaning there's a machlokes fundamentally in two directions. Says the Gemara Amalei Rabbi Yossi. So Amalei. So Rashi says back to him, Rabbi Yossi b'shittas Rabbi Akiva Rabbi Amna. What Rabbi Yossi was holding with was he wasn't telling you his opinion. He was telling you the opinion of Rabbi Akiva's Rabbi. He didn't hold of it. He doesn't hold it. Meaning he's working within the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, but he doesn't hold of that. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi said to Rav Kahana, Bish Lama Rabbi Yossi l'savar Rabbi Akiva. Makes sense that Rabbi Yossi doesn't hold like Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, "Minayli Revi b'kodesh u'pasol." How do you know the Revi b'kodesh is invalid? Meaning you cannot use that any longer. That there's a concept called Revi b'kodesh. V'dinhu makes sense. Uma mechusa kippurim. It's a logical inference. Ma mechusa kippurim shemuta b'truma. A mechusa kippurim is allowed to eat truma. What's a mechusa kippurim? Mechusa kippurim means that somebody that is tahor completely but needs to bring a korban in order to finish the process of tahara. His muta b'truma is allowed. Kohen that is mechusa kippurim is allowed to eat truma, but pasal b'kodesh. But he is his pasal. He would make a korban pasal. He's not allowed to eat from korbanos because he's lacking a korban. Shlishi. A shlishi, somebody that has a third level of tuma, she'posel b'truma. He could be posel truma in a din she'asa revi b'kodesh. Doesn't make sense. Is it not logical that he would make a revi b'kodesh? Meaning, he's trying to prove that there's such a thing called revi'i when it comes to korbanos. So a shlishi that's posel b'truma, meaning he would be posel truma. In a din she has a revi b'kodesh. It doesn't make sense that it would make a revi b'kodesh. Of course, there's such a thing as revi b'kodesh. V'lamadnu, when we learn shlishi b'kodesh min ha'torah u'revi mikal v'chomer, and it comes out that we learn the din of shlishi b'kodesh from the Torah. The Torah tells us specifically and explicitly about revi b'kodesh, about shlishi b'kodesh, and revi we learn from a kal v'chomer. Revi b'kodesh we learn from a kal v'chomer. Shlishi min ha'torah. What exactly is this din of shlishi min ha'torah? So we'll just see the pasuk, and then next year we will discuss it. Pasuk says, "Va'basa asher yigat b'chol tamei lo ye'achel," and the basa meat asher yigat. Turning over the page to Yates Amud Aleph, asher yigat b'chol tamei lo ye'achel. The meat that touches anything tamei lo ye'achel cannot be eaten. That's the pasuk. We will continue with the limit of that pasuk in our next year, which is going to be in a few minutes' time. Everybody should have a Gavaldik Chodesh, and we'll see you at 10 o'clock.